It's a really noisy world out there. It's hard to be heard. I think of information flow inside businesses like blood flow inside the body, and healthy organizations have healthy information flow, like healthy bodies have healthy blood flow.
Thank you for joining us for the CBIA BizCast, powered by Google. I'm Scott Bolio, and for Amanda Marlowe. And today we're very happy to be joined by Dean Brenner, the CEO and co-founder of the Latimer Group. Dean, thanks so much for joining us on the BizCast.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm really excited to be here.
That's great. We're looking forward to a good conversation. You've got a really interesting story and a lot of good lessons, I think, for our audience. Let's kick it off though. Tell us about the Latimer Group. What are you guys doing? What you're all about?
Sure. We're based just south of Hartford in Wallingford, Connecticut. We've been around for 23 years. Team of 15, and the Latimer Group coaches and trains powerful, persuasive communication skills. Our typical client is a large corporate organization, but we've built an entire curriculum around persuasive communication, and we teach workshops, we do executive coaching, and we partner with our clients in a number of ways, but the common denominator of all of it is communication skills development.
Communication's always been important, I think, even more so now than ever before.
Couldn't agree more. We like to say at the Latimer Group that it's a really noisy world out there, and there's a lot of things competing for attention span. And just because you have a good idea or feel like people should listen to you doesn't necessarily mean that they will.
Right.
So what we really do is we teach communication skills that allow people to articulate their message, get to the point, not waste time, articulate the value. And those are really important skills today, and not only for the individual, but having them scaled across the enterprise.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that we work on this,
and we're going to dive into a lot of that in a few minutes. First off, though, let's. Where did the name the Latimer Group come from? It's an interesting little story.
It is, and it's got a little Connecticut DNA in it. My wife Emily and I had about 25 years ago. We'd been married for about a year. We both left our prior jobs and were traveling around the country. We didn't really have any commitments. And we were camping in national parks. We disappeared off the grid for like 3 months. And the big conversation was, what are we going to do? And we came up with this idea for the Latimer Group. And very quickly, the idea then turned to, well, what are we going to call this thing? And Latimer is named after a lighthouse off Stonington, Connecticut. Latimer Lighthouse, which is right near where Emily and I met, right near where I grew up. And I always liked the idea of a lighthouse as a corporate symbol, a corporate metaphor. And that was a lighthouse that had a lot of personal meaning for me. So the idea for a communication skills firm, we decided to name it after Latimer Lighthouse.
I love that, and have that kind of that Connecticut tie, that
for sure,
anchor to it almost. Yeah. So let's go back. So you're on this cross country trip to come up with the night. Where did that come from? Because there's something to that too.
Sure. There's a little bit to it. Emily and I had been married about a year. At that time, I was racing sailboats professionally, training for the U.S. Olympic team, and trained for the 2000 team. And the trials were in June of 2000. And my teammates and I were one of the top ranked teams in the world. I think we peaked at around 5th in the world rankings. And we ended up losing the selection trials. We finished 2nd, which means we didn't get to go to the games in Sydney. And Emily and I, she was teaching at the time, and we had sort of planned our whole lives up until that point around the idea of going to the Olympics in the fall of 2000.
Yeah.
And we didn't get to go. So we'd both left our jobs. We had planned to be in Sydney, Australia that September. So that didn't work out. And all of a sudden, we just had literally nothing on our calendar. So before we dove back into jobs or anything, we didn't own a house. We didn't have a car payment. We didn't have children yet. We just decided to travel.
Yeah.
So we got in the car and we disappeared for 3 months. We visited 15 national parks, camped, hiked, just literally made it up one day at a time. And one of the goals on that trip was for both of us to figure out what are we going to do with our lives.
Yeah.
And it was on that trip that the idea for the Latimer Group came up.
I think it's a remarkable story of to have, you've dealt this kind of hand that you weren't expecting.
Sure.
And to have to navigate that couldn't have
Yeah.
been easy.
It certainly would have been more fun to go to the Olympics. That was the whole plan.
Yeah.
But that didn't work out. And, you one door closes, another one opens, I guess is the cliche. And we were actually in Grand Canyon hiking up the Bright Angel Trail. We'd been camping in base of the canyon for about 3 days, and we had not come up with the idea yet.
Yeah.
And it was still pre-dawn, and we're huffing and puffing our way up the exit up Bright Angel Trail. And Emily said the magic words. She said, we're overthinking this. You love to coach.
Yeah.
You want to start a business, and you're a good public speaker. Build a business around that.
Yeah. It's as simple as that.
And it was really that simple.
Yeah.
And that was in September of 2000. And we spent the next year figuring it out, planning for it, launched it in 2002. And here we are 23 years later.
Quite the fateful trip.
Yeah, in retrospect, it ended up being a pretty seminal moment for us for a bunch of reasons. And interestingly enough, we're going back to Grand Canyon this summer, 25 years later with our kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's not the reason we're going back, but it's not lost on us. That, 25 years after that conversation, we're going back.
Yeah. All right. So you're back home. You've made this decision.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of our audience can kind of appreciate this of you've made this decision to start your own company.
Sure.
That's it. Even once you've made that decision, okay, now what? How do you, tell me about that early couple of years.
A lot of time on my hands, and taking the leap of faith to start a business is a big choice. You have to know what you want to build.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really believe in it, you got to stick with it, because there were a lot of things that came my way in the early days. Hey, could you help us with this? Could you run a workshop on that? I had just come out of the Olympic experience. So a lot of people were asking me, oh, you're starting your own business. Will you do a team building workshop for us? Can you come run some sort of team event? I got a lot of those requests in the early days. And one piece of advice I got from a dear friend was the work that you take early will define what work you get later.
Oh, interesting.
Because that'll be what people know you for, and that's what they'll start referring you to.
Yeah.
So it was very hard in the early days, but I turned down all that team building work because that's not what I thought I was building. I wanted to build a communications coaching firm.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a lot of patience. I mean, it took us about 2 years to get our first real break.
Yeah. And did, that first couple of years, what do you think you learned not only about, owning and running a business, but actually the business of communication coaching? Did things shift for you at all during that time, or did it?
Most of the time was spent networking and trying to get people to consider hiring me. I had to build some basic concepts, but really most of the concepts that we later started teaching, probably, I wouldn't have said this at the time to our clients, but I was building it in real time. I was building it very organically as opportunities were coming my way, because I knew generally what the concept of the Latimer Group was going to be, but the specifics were being worked out in real time.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until we started to expand the team. I hired my first colleague in 2008, my second colleague in 2014, and now we're a team of 15 people.
Yeah.
Once I started to build up the team a little bit, then the conversations really started in earnest about, what's our intellectual property? What's our core content? I was classic entrepreneurial story. I was winging it a bit in the early years, trying to just come up with things that people would find valuable.
Yep.
And then once you start to feel like you identify that, then you try to institutionalize that a little bit. And that's exactly the journey that we were on.
Do you think that journey helped you kind of solidify what your mission was?
Totally. And, in the early days, I thought I was building a business that was just going to coach presentation skills, which is a big thing that a lot of people need to know how to present. So, our first tagline had something to do with developing presentation skills. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it wasn't until probably 6 years into the business that I was talking to another good friend and mentor. And he said, presentation skills coaches are a dime a dozen. He said, you need to refine it a little bit more. So we ended up hanging our hat, so to speak, on the concept of persuasion.
Okay.
Because being persuasive is something that potential clients would find tangible.
Right.
They'd say, oh, you can help me and my team be more persuasive. oh, that's got a sales application. That's got a collaboration application. I can visualize
A lot of what business is about persuasion
and building consensus.
Yeah.
So once we pivoted the business so that it was specifically about that, everything changed. And then we just started building all of our content around how does a person get to the point? How does a person be more persuasive? How does a person drive outcomes? And at that point, the business really started to take off.
And it's not just about, you talked about presentation skills, but like this goes, it's not just say, hey, somebody's talking to the media or giving speaking at a conference. This is internal person to person meetings.
100%. Yeah. In the early days, if you'd asked me, say in 2004, 2005, what I thought the most typical use case would be for what the Latimer Group was building, I would have guessed external sales presentations for sales teams.
Sure.
That's what I really thought the application was going to be. As it turns out, that is still part of what we do. We work with sales teams all the time. But by far the most common use case, when companies hire us, the vast majority of communication skills that we're helping them with are their internal comms. Because everybody spends most of their day in meetings, virtual or in person, phone calls, one-on-ones, presentations. There's an enormous amount of information exchange that happens inside every single large organization. And when the individual, but also when the group have skills around getting to the point, driving an outcome, not wasting people's time, that becomes incredibly valuable. One of the questions we ask in every one of our workshops, I was up early this morning. I taught a workshop at 6 o'clock in the morning for a group in Europe. And I always ask the same question: what percentage of your day do you spend communicating in one form or another? And the average answer is like 90%.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's internal meetings.
Yep.
So how do you make those more effective? How do you help people not waste each other's time? And that it's very easy to visualize how quickly that drops to the bottom line.
It's funny, you see like the memes of this meeting could have been an email.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And part of what we coach is, what are the triggers to cause you to say, oh, I should cancel this meeting? So that when you do hold the meeting, it's perceived as more valuable because you chose not to cancel it.
Right.
And then once you're in it, how do you value each other's time? How do you articulate what's most important? How do you get to the point?
And that goes into team building too, because 100%. That valuing each other's time is a critical piece of building that morale.
And every leader can visualize the value of their people's time. And if you can start talking about reducing wasted time, everybody cares about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's directly related to what Emily and I talked about in September of 2000 in Grand Canyon, but it's taken on a specific focus that there's no way I could have visualized then.
Let's fast forward a little bit. Yeah. So we talk about communication and you talk about meetings and how we communicate. Let's talk a little bit what happened in 2020, 5 years ago. COVID changed the way we communicate.
100%.
And I think for not just, person to person, but for businesses, for everybody. Yeah. How did that affect what you do and also your business?
It almost ended us. That's the only honest answer to that. We had grown nicely at that point. Pre-COVID, the Latimer Group was up to 7 people. Really nice little business. Very reliable clients. Many of them are the well-known names in the Hartford area, even then, but especially that's true now. And about 98% of our work was delivered in person.
Wow.
And I remember talking to my longest standing colleague, Whitney. I remember a conversation. She came into my office in mid-February 2020, and we had done our typical sales goal effort, and we put a number that was about 20% above our prior year in 2019, and that was our reach sales goal for the year. And I remember Whitney coming in and saying, I'm looking at all the business we have in the pipeline. I think we're going to blow our number out of the water. Essentially what the conversation was. We were feeling very, very good in mid, say around Feb 15, Feb 20, 2020. I'll never forget the conversation.
What a couple of weeks will do.
And then literally within weeks, we went to a 0 revenue environment. We basically had no revenue for about 4 months, starting in March through, midsummer. We went down to 5 people. We made some cuts. We got a small PPP loan. I took myself off the payroll for 6 months. My wife and I had a lot of deep conversations about how far we were going to take this. I most days in April, May, and June of 2020, I would call my wife before I left the office and told her to meet me in the driveway so my kids wouldn't see me crying, because it was like we went from this. It was very surreal. We went from this feeling of, oh my God, we've built this awesome thing, we're on our way, to literally weeks later, like not being able to visualize survival.
Yeah.
And I think business owners and leaders probably share some scar tissue around that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I don't know that I'll ever, even when things are really good, I don't know that I'll ever be truly comfortable again.
Yeah. Because
what the early days of COVID taught us is how quickly the world can change.
Yeah.
And what you think is true is not always true.
Yeah.
But the story has a good ending, and it was hard on a lot of people, but for us it did.
Yeah.
The colleagues that I had with me at the time, several of whom are still with the Latimer Group today, just rolled up their sleeves, and we reinvented our entire service offerings to virtual platforms. Everybody was learning how to do that, but we had to learn how to teach workshops and coach, which is harder than just take an all-day workshop and put it on an all-day Zoom.
You had to learn not only how to actually do it yourself, but then take that and teach it.
Yes, and how do you break it up into smaller chunks, and what are the exercises, and how do adults learn online, and how do you engage an audience online? It was completely different than doing it in person. And the interesting thing was, starting in about July of 2020, once we felt we could do this virtually, we started calling all of our clients and said, hey, would you be interested in piloting something with us? And it was funny. All the budgets were still in place. And what all the big companies were looking for, they were desperate for anything they could offer their employees.
Yeah.
So when we started saying to them, we could do what we used to do for you, but we could do it virtually, literally nobody said no. And we went right back to an unbelievably busy schedule. The fourth quarter of 2020 ended up being our best quarter ever up until that point. And then since then, our business has more than doubled, and now our team is twice as big as it was pre-COVID. So it completely reinvented our business. And even to this day, we're probably 60 to 70% of our revenue is virtual, and about 30%, or the remainder is in person.
You have that scar tissue, but you've been able to kind of build on it.
There's always luck involved, but there was also, the team that our team kept their heads. I did all the freaking out for everybody, and our team kept their head about them. And we just said, all right, how do we do this? There's got to be a way to do this. And there was.
Do you think that your Olympic experience and your, working on a team like that, did that play any sort of role, or did you take any, or even broadly, do you take any lessons from those experiences into what you do?
Oh, every day. My Olympic experiences, which included, after my competition days were over, I ended up coaching and being team leader for 2 Olympic teams. So I went to 2 Olympic Games in China in 2008 and London in 2012. That impacts my work every day. Taking the long view, not overreacting to short-term hurdles, trying to figure out how to involve everybody in the team effort. Not to say that it always goes smoothly, but yeah, I draw on those Olympic experiences all the time. There's an innate competitive DNA that anybody that competes at the Olympic level has.
Yeah.
So did that help me in 2020? Probably. But I think what helped me more was great colleagues and the support of Emily. Because at any point, Emily could have said, hey, this is too much risk, I'm out.
Yeah.
And it would have been very, very hard for me to ignore that.
Absolutely.
And she never wavered. Even though I run the business, she owns the business. She's the majority owner of the Latimer Group, and she's never wavered for a moment. So I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about a little bit more about kind of, the importance of what you do.
Sure.
We talked about, the breadth of communication, and the importance of persuasion and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Why is it so important for businesses to focus on this?
It as I think I may have said a few minutes ago, it's a really noisy world out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be heard. And I think of information flow inside businesses like blood flow inside the body.
Mm-hmm.
And healthy organizations have healthy information flow, like healthy bodies have healthy blood flow. And if you think about a meeting is kind of like a blood cell, okay, where the blood comes in and then the blood gets redistributed. Meetings are the same way when it comes to information. People come together, information comes into the room, and if it's a healthy communication culture, then the information gets effectively distributed outside of that meeting. The metaphor actually really works well.
Yeah.
So when a body is really healthy, when the arteries are healthy, when the heart is pumping well, when there's no restricted blood flow, it's a healthy body. That's the way we think about information flow inside businesses. So that takes the form of, do your people have good communication skills? Does the business have a good meeting culture? Does the business have an effective decision-making framework? All of those things, communication skills, meeting culture, and decision-making frameworks really are the three legs of the stool,
yep,
upon which healthy information flow rests. So I don't see how it has to be a priority for everybody.
Yeah. One of those legs of the stool goes and everything falls over.
100%. So, it is, I really like the blood flow metaphor. Yeah. And you got to keep the blood flowing through the organization. It leads to better outcomes. It leads to better decisions. It leads to happier employees. It leads to satisfied leadership and shareholders.
There you go.
So,
you do a lot of business for a lot of big companies kind of all over the world, right?
We do.
What is it about Connecticut that you guys like?
Why did we land in Connecticut? Yeah. The easy answer is I fell in love, and this is where my wife was from. So it wasn't, I can't say that, when I was a young adult, I got to get to Connecticut. It's just where Emily and I decided to settle our lives. But Connecticut does have a number of incredibly well-known organizations that call it home. So once we knew we were going to settle here, and once we knew what the Latimer Group was, we were hoping it to be, you look around and there's a lot of incredibly well-respected international corporations that are here. So it gave some early opportunities for some great networking. So we've never looked back, and we've never considered anywhere but Connecticut as our home. Yeah.
If there are companies that want to reach out, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you guys?
Well, we're easy to find online, either, our website, thelatimergroup.com. We are not bashful in how we position ourselves online. So we're easy to find, but thelatimergroup.com is the best way to do it.
So we like to close out our conversations by asking you to do a little bit of reflection and kind of look back. You've got a successful, interesting career to kind of look back on. Do you ever look back and think on, what if I had qualified for Sydney, where you'd be now? All the time.
I think the Latimer Group was likely where I was going to end up, regardless of the Olympic journey. Because it plays to my strengths, and I had always wanted to start my own business. So I think that was always going to be part of it.
Had that entrepreneurial spirit.
But exactly. But if you had told me in 2002, right after we launched the Latimer Group, that I'd still be doing this in 2025, I would have been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
The failure rate is high for startups, and we had a lot of luck along the way. We got the help of a lot of people. But, I think as I reflect back on it, I have a very soft spot in my heart whenever anybody tells me they want to start their own business. And whenever somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, can you give me some advice?" The answer is always yes. I will spend as much time with them as they need, because it takes a lot of courage to hang out your own shingle. And it takes a lot of courage to hang in there when times get bad. We've been through a lot of peaks and valleys. at the Latimer Group over the last 23 years, just like every other company. And you have to have a lot of faith, and you have to have people around you that are going to help you maintain that faith. And I try to do that for others now because a lot of people have done it for me.
Great.
Yeah.
I think that's good. That's a good way to close it out. Dean, thank you so much for joining us on the BizCast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having
the conversation.
me. Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have any ideas for a future episode. And for more episodes, head over to CBIA.com.